The urn hissed. Too loud. Miss Marple raised her head. She knew that hiss. Every Thursday it sounded steady. This was sharper, longer. Lady Bramley sat proud in her high chair. Her rings glittered as she adjusted her gloves. Her right hand rested near the silver tray. Her left hovered, close to the radiator. The room held the usual circle. Captain Fanshawe with his cough. Mrs. Brigg, brisk, exact. Lydia Martin, pale, drawn. Two neighbors whispering behind teacups. Marple watched patterns. Every ritual had a rhythm. Lady Bramley always poured, right hand, on the tap. Left hand, steady on the iron. Same pose, week after week. Mrs. Brigg fussed with the lace runner. She tugged one corner, smoothed another. Her eyes flicked toward Lydia, sharp, quick, gone. Lydia poured milk into a jug. Her hands trembled. She spilled a drop. She looked at the urn, as if it mocked her. Costs rise, Lady Bramley muttered. She sighed. Coal, sugar, wages, all climb. And yet, standards must hold. Marple noted the words. Mrs. Brigg's lips pressed tight. Lydia's face twitched. No one spoke further. The urn hissed again. Steam curled. The tap gleamed. Marple leaned forward. Routine ruled this house. Even discontent followed pattern. The same remarks, the same glares, the same silences. Marple's mind ticked. She remembered last week. The same hands, the same hiss, softer, the same scolding voice. She turned her eyes on Lydia. The girl looked away, cheeks pale, eyes restless, a storm, hidden under duty. Mrs. Brigg returned with a folded cloth. She dabbed at the table, her movements brisk, too brisk. She muttered about polish, about standards. Captain Fanshawe coughed again. The sound rattled. Lady Bramley waved him off. You'll live. Tea helps. Marple smiled faintly. Her needles clicked once. She knitted without thought. Her real work was watching. The urn gave a sudden shudder. The table shook faintly. Marple's eyes fixed on the plug. Scratches, fresh. Her gaze narrowed. She spoke softly. The urn is lively today. Lady Bramley laughed. A faithful beast. 20 years it served me. Why not a few more? Mrs. Brigg muttered, if the wiring holds. Her tone flat, almost sharp. No one answered. The neighbors looked down. Their cups trembled. The silence grew heavy. Marple placed her knitting down. She folded her hands. She watched Lady Bramley rise, steps slow, firm. She moved toward the urn. The hiss grew louder. Marple's breath caught. She knew what would follow. The posture was forming already. Right hand, ready for the tap. Left hand, drifting to the radiator. Lady Bramley reached for the tap. She fell, without a cry. Inspector Slack stood in the doorway. Lady Bramley lay on the carpet, her body stiff, her hand still stretched toward the tap. A black burn scar marked her palm. The lace runner smoked faintly. The metal tap bore a new crater, sharp-edged, bright. Slack raised his voice. No one touch a thing! Mrs. Brigg froze. Lydia staggered back. The neighbors shrieked, then hushed. Captain Fanshawe leaned on his cane, face pale. Slack bent closer. He saw the mark on the palm, round, brutal, not natural. Clear the space, he barked. He gestured to a constable. Seal the doors, windows too. He drew a line in the air. From this hearth to that window, no one crosses. This room is sealed. Lydia's hands shook. Her lips moved, but no words came. She clutched her sleeve, her eyes fixed on the urn. Mrs. Brigg's face stayed set, her chin raised, her tone clipped. Such a tragedy. Sudden, God rest her. Slack stared at her. He said nothing. He called to a constable. Fetch the doctor. Now tell him it's urgent. He'll want his bag. The neighbors whispered again. One murmured. It hissed. Then she... Slack snapped. Quiet. Save it for your statement. He walked to the urn. He didn't touch it. He only looked. The tap gleamed as if scrubbed. But the fresh crater told another tale. He crouched lower. The plug lay snug in the socket. Too snug. Scratches circled the faceplate. Fresh, sharp. He stood. Everyone here will write their statement. No exceptions. Mrs. Brigg folded her arms. I'll write. I saw nothing. Lydia whispered. Her voice cracked. I begged her not to pour. I begged. She covered her mouth. Tears welled. Slack noted it. Fear. Or guilt. He couldn't yet tell. The constable returned. Dr. Haydock's on his way. Slack nodded. Keep him clear of the body until I say. He'll confirm what I already see. He circled the table again. His eyes locked on the lace. A wet stain spread near the tray. A path ran straight to the radiator. He knelt. He touched the runner with his pencil end. It was damp. Too damp. Deliberate. Not careless. He straightened. He studied each face in turn. Mrs. Brigg, calm. Lydia, broken. Fanshawe, trembling. The neighbors, pale and silent. Slack's voice cut through. This was no accident. No loose wire. No failing urn. He paused. He let the silence stretch. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned cold. This, he said, was set. Habits tell the truth. Miss Marple sat with her knitting in her lap. Her eyes moved, not her hands. She replayed the scene. Lady Bramley, right hand, on the tap. Left hand, on the radiator. Every Thursday. Every time. Marple whispered to herself. 15 years. Never changed. She rose slowly. Slack glanced her way, but did not stop her. She bent near the lace runner. The fabric was still damp. A trail of wet led straight to the radiator's edge. She tapped the plug with her pencil. The brass shone oddly. Not polish, not age, but scratches, fresh. Someone had forced it. She noted it quietly. Her face calm. Her mind restless. She turned to the servants. They stood huddled by the door, faces pale, eyes downcast. Your duties this morning? She asked softly. One girl answered. Polish the brass, lay the cloth, fetch coal. Another added, clean the sockets. Mrs. Brigg said so. Marple nodded. The housekeeper gave orders. The staff obeyed. Routine, fixed, predictable. She looked at Mrs. Brigadier, arms folded, chin lifted, eyes flat. Then Marple studied Lydia. The companion clutched her sleeve. Tears streaked her face, her breathing sharp. A whisper passed between the neighbors. Marple caught the words. A codicil. They say the old lady made one. Her needles stilled in her bag. A codicil. Favoring Lydia. A new motive, whispered in corners. Marple asked gently, You heard this from whom? The neighbor shrugged. Word about the village. The lawyer was seen. Papers carried. No one knows for certain. Marple's mind sharpened. If true, Lydia gained much. If false, rumor alone could plant suspicion. She turned again to the table. The urn loomed silent now, its hiss gone, its work done. She touched the lace once more, wet, cold. Not an accidental spill. A conductor, laid by design. Slack joined her. What do you see? He asked. She answered plain. I see habit. Lady Bramley trusted habit. Someone turned that habit into her death. Slack scowled. You speak in riddles. Marple shook her head. No riddle. Routine, that's all. Her eyes scanned the mantel. Books, letters, a tidy stack, as if prepared. But one space gaped, a gap too wide for comfort. She leaned closer. She saw dust disturbed, an outline left behind, rectangular, envelope size. She pressed her lips together. An envelope had rested there. Now it was gone. She straightened. Her gaze shifted back to Lydia. The girl shivered under her eyes. Marple's voice dropped to a whisper. An envelope marked, Will, is missing. The caller wants money. Today. Lydia Martin gripped the receiver tight. The voice on the other end pressed harder. "You owe. You've delayed long enough. Pay, or I speak." Her throat dried. She whispered, "I have nothing." The line snapped dead. Her hand shook as she placed the receiver down. Her pride burned. She would not beg. Not from Lady Bramley. Not from anyone. She pressed her palms to her eyes. The debt was real. Small at first. Now heavy. A stone she dragged every day. She thought of the whispers, a codicil, a will, her name linked to it. But she had no such promise, only rumor, only suspicion. She straightened her back. "I gain nothing," she muttered. "Nothing but blame." Her eyes moved to the window. The garden outside looked still, but her reflection showed strain, lines of worry, eyes hollow, from sleepless nights. A knock at the door startled her. Mrs. Crisp, the neighbor, stepped in. She leaned, close, voice low. "They say new papers were drawn, favoring you." Lydia's lips parted, her denial sharp. "Number, that's false." Mrs. Crisp smirked. "False? Then why did the lawyer come? Why were documents carried into the house?" Lydia's heart thudded. She swallowed hard. "I don't know. I never saw them. Lady Bramley never told me." The neighbor's eyes gleamed. "Still, people talk." She left the hall with a rustle of skirts. Lydia stood frozen, each rumor cut deeper. Debt at her back, whispers at her front, suspicion closing from both sides. She closed the door. She leaned against it. Tears pressed at her eyes. She fought them down. A voice broke the silence. Inspector Slack. He stood at the threshold of her room, his gaze sharp, his jaw set. "You've secrets, Miss Martin." Lydia drew a breath. "I have nothing to hide." Slack stepped inside. He scanned the room. His eyes searched corners, shelves, drawers. His hand touched her coat, draped across a chair. He reached into the pocket. He drew out a folded slip. His brow furrowed. His lips thinned. He unfolded it slow. A shop's mark at the top. An ironmonger's name. A list of items. Fuse wire, screwdriver, thread. Slack raised his eyes, his tone heavy. "Why would you need these?" Lydia's face went pale. Her knees weakened. Her mouth opened. But no words came. Slack held the receipt high. "From your coat, Miss Martin. From your pocket. Explain it if you can." Black thread, fresh. Inspector Slack crouched by the socket. The plug bore marks, scratches across the brass, threads tied neat and tight. He leaned closer. The knots looped left. He nodded once. Left-handed work. He turned to the constable. "Bag this plug. Careful, no smudges." The constable obeyed. Slack rose, eyes sweeping the room. Lydia stood against the wall, her face white, her breath quick. He stepped toward her. "You write with your left hand, don't you?" She swallowed. "Yes, always." He pointed back at the plug. "Left-handed knots, not clumsy, clean, practiced. Yours?" She shook her head fast. "No, not mine." Slack pressed harder. "You expect me to believe another left-hander tied those, in this house?" Mrs. Briggs stepped forward. Her voice clipped. "I saw her, near the urn, just before the tea." All eyes turned. Lydia's lips trembled. "I passed by, yes, but I touched nothing." Mrs. Briggs' chin lifted. "She lingered. I told her not to meddle." Slack grunted, 2 points against her now. The receipt, the knots. He crossed the floor. He studied the urn again. The damp runner clung to the tray. The mark on the tap, still raw. Tools, thread, fuse wire, all in her pocket. He looked at the constables. She had what she needed. Marple's soft voice broke in. "Perhaps. But appearances deceive." Slack shot her a look. "Or they reveal." He paced. The carpet. His boots thudded steady. He spoke loud enough for all to hear. "Lydia Martin lived here. She knew the habit. She knew the urn. She knew the radiator." Who better to build the trap? Lydia burst out. I had no reason. Slack's brow rose. No reason? When whispers say you stood in her will, a codicil, papers drawn in your favor? Gasps circled the room. The neighbors muttered low. Lydia's shoulders sagged. Her voice cracked. Rumors only. She never told me such a thing. Mrs. Brigg cut in. But you hoped, and debt makes hope dangerous. Lydia turned away, eyes wet. Her pride fought her words. She refused to beg. She refused to plead. Slack pressed harder. He pointed at her trembling hands. She had the means. She had the tools. She had the chance. He let silence stretch. The circle of faces stared at Lydia. Her lips parted. But no defense came. Slack's voice fell low, sharp as steel. She had means and need. A small shock earlier. Miss Marple lifted her eyes from her knitting. Her words hung quiet. The servants shifted uneasily. One girl stepped forward. It was at servants' tea, ma'am. The urn hissed strange. I touched the tap, a tingle in my hand. Just quick, then it stopped. Slack frowned. Why was this not reported? The maid lowered her gaze. I thought nothing of it. Just a sting. I told Nell. She laughed. We used another pot. Marple leaned closer. And the time? 3:15, ma'am, before the bell rang for the guests. Marple's mind clicked. The trap had been tested, not at the moment of death, but earlier. Hours earlier. She folded her hands. Show me the tablecloth you used. The maid fetched it from the linen basket. A corner bore a dark mark, a hole, singed neat through lace, the size of a coin. Marple touched it with her pencil. The cloth crumbled slightly, scorched, not by candle, by current. Slack bent low. He sniffed the air above it. No smell now. But it burned. Marple nodded, her voice soft. It burned when the servants poured, not when the guests sat. Lydia looked up suddenly, her eyes wide. I was in the village at 3, buying wool. Ask the shopkeeper. He saw me. Slack paused. His jaw tightened. Her words rang steady. Marple said nothing. She only studied the cloth again. Her fingers traced the brittle edge. Routine shifted in her mind. The test proved design. The hand behind it struck early, confident, careful. Certain the plan would hold until Lady Bramley touched the tap. Mrs. Brigg folded her arms. Her lips pressed thin. Servants exaggerate. A tingle, a scorch. Hardly proof. Marple looked at her, her gaze calm, her words gentle. Proof? Perhaps not. Pattern? Yes. The constable coughed. What now, Inspector? Slack growled. Collect that cloth. Seal it. The servant flinched as he placed it in a bag. She whispered, It was real. We all saw the spark. Marple turned back to the others, her tone low, almost kind. Habits betray. The lady's habit killed her, but the killer's habit, testing, may yet betray them too. She reached for the bagged cloth once more. Her fingers brushed the scorched lace. She did not return it to the constable. Instead, she slipped the edge into her own small purse. The constable blinked. Madam? Marple smiled faintly. Only a scrap, but scraps tell stories. She closed the purse tight. Her voice a whisper meant for herself, alone. Let it rest with me. For now. Marple pocketed the singed scrap. The body speaks plain. Dr. Haydock stood by the chair. He pulled his stethoscope from his ears. He looked at Slack. No collapse, no stroke. The signs are clear. Slack folded his arms. Then, electric shock. The burn on the palm is exact. The stiffness in the body fits. She died at the tap. Not before. Slack nodded once. She was healthy then. Haydock leaned down again. He lifted the wrist gently. No hidden illness. Her heart was strong. This was not nature. This was forced. The constable wrote it down. Cause of death, doctor? Shock from current. Direct. Haydock moved toward the urn. He pointed at the socket. Current passed clean through. Yet the fuse never blew. Slack frowned. Explain. Haydock tapped the faceplate. Normal fuse wire is thin. It melts when current rises, stops danger. But here, it held. He turned the plate aside with his forceps. Inside gleamed a thick strand. Too heavy, 15-amp wire where only 5 should sit. Slack growled. So someone replaced it? Haydock nodded. Not accident, deliberate. They wanted the current to flow strong. No break, no stop. He stepped back. He wiped his hands. The protection was gone. That made her death certain. Marple's quiet voice floated in. Safety undone becomes weapon. Haydock looked at her. You see the same. She gave a faint nod. Her eyes stayed on the blackened lace. Slack turned to the staff. Who touches the fuse board? Silence. Then Mrs. Briggs spoke. I manage the lamps. I change the fuses when they blow. No one else bothers. Haydock's eyes narrowed. How often? Enough. Old house. Wires misbehave. Slack muttered. Or someone makes them misbehave. Haydock knelt by the board. His fingers traced the screws. Fresh turn here. See the mark? The slot is sharp. Tool used this week. The constable peered close. Yes, sir. Not dusted, not dull. Knew Haydock stood again. His coat rustled. This was not careless. It was planned. Heavy wire placed to bypass protection. Whoever did it knew what they wanted. Slack stared at the board. His jaw locked. The urn, the cloth, the tap, the radiator. And now this, all parts of one design. Haydock placed his stethoscope away. Doctors look for causes. Here the cause is plain. It was no failure of body. It was no failure of chance. It was choice. Marple spoke soft. Choice, yes, but whose? The servants looked away. Lydia wrung her hands. Mrs. Briggs' face stayed still. Haydock pressed the panel fully back. The thick copper strand glinted, fresh, untarnished, cut too long for need. Slack's voice dropped cold. The Fuseboard shows a fresh 15-amp strand. Evidence piles fast. Inspector Slack stood at the foot of the stairs. His constable hurried down, holding a small box. Found in her sewing drawer, sir. Slack took it. He opened the lid. Inside lay a coil of fuse wire, bright, unused, not sewing thread. He snapped the lid shut. He marched to Lydia's room. She stood pale in the doorway. What now? She whispered. Slack shoved the box forward. Fuse wire in your sewing things. Explain that. Her eyes widened. I sew lace. I mend hems. Why would I use wire? Why indeed? Slack pressed. Unless it was not lace. You meant to mend. He moved past her. He opened her wardrobe. His hand brushed cloth. He pulled a folded runner free. He shook it out. The edge bore water stains. The fabric smelled faintly damp, recently dried, too recent. Slack held it high. Another cloth, wet as the one on the table. Tell me, Miss Martin, why keep it hidden? Lydia's voice cracked. I don't know how it came there. Mrs. Briggs appeared in the doorway, her voice cut sharp. She lingered near the urn before tea. I saw her. And now, you see her cloth. Slack narrowed his eyes. The circle tightened. Evidence stacked neat. He reached for a letter on the mantel. It bore Lady Bramley's hand. The words shook, but clear. Ungrateful companions bring ruin. Beware. Slack read it aloud. He looked straight at Lydia. She was warning herself against you. Lydia clutched her chest. No, she never meant me. Slack ignored her protest. He stepped back. His gaze swept the room. She bought tools. She bought wire. She tied left-handed knots. She stored a wet cloth. And the lady herself feared betrayal. Lydia shook her head hard. Her voice rose sharp. I had no cause to kill her. No cause. Slack's jaw set. You had debt. You had motive. You had a chance, and rumor says you had her will. Lydia's knees bent. She gripped the chair for balance. Her tears streaked fast. Her pride held back any plea. The constable shifted uneasy. Marple's quiet voice drifted near. Inspector, scraps mislead. Evidence may be placed. Slack snapped at her. Enough riddles. I deal in proof, not scraps. He looked back at Lydia. Her silence stood heavy. The room held its breath. Slack drew out his cuffs. The metal gleamed cold. Miss Martin, he said, you will come with us. The handcuffs came out. Left-handed is not enough. Miss Marple sat quiet as Slack pressed Lydia harder. Her eyes stayed on the plug, her thoughts on the knots. Left-handed, yes, but too neat. Too practiced. She rose slowly. Inspector, may I see how the staff tie their parcels? Slack frowned. What for? Not speak as loud as words, she answered. He waved his hand. Very well, show her. The pantry boy stepped forward first. He tied a small bundle with string, right-handed, loops uneven, ends short. Marple nodded. Not the same. Next came the maid. She wound thread clumsily. The bow slipped, not steady, not clean. Marple shook her head. Still not the same. Mrs. Briggs stood firm. Waste of time, but if you insist. She took the string. Her hands moved fast. Left loops. Swift pull. Tight finish. Clean. Exact. Unbroken motion. Marple leaned in, her eyes sharp. Again. Please. Mrs. Briggs tied once more. The knot identical. Left-handed. Precise. Strong. Slack grunted. Matches the plug. Mrs. Briggs' lips pressed thin. Knots are knots. Anyone can tie them. Marple's gaze stayed fixed. But habits show. Just as Lady Bramley's habit was the urn, your habit is this tie. Quick, sharp, always left, always tight. She turned to Lydia. Now you, my dear. Lydia's hands shook. She tried to loop the thread. The knot slipped, the bow uneven, her fingers clumsy. Slack muttered. Not the same. Lydia dropped the bundle. I told you, I cannot tie them neat. Not like that. Marple picked up the string. She studied both knots side by side. Lydia's loose, Mrs. Briggs. Exact. She turned to Slack. Appearances deceive. Left-handed is not enough. Consistency proves more. Only one pair of hands ties with that precision. Slack's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed on Mrs. Brigadier. You mean? Marple cut him short. These knots are a signature. I never asked for her money. Lydia Martin sat before the lawyer's desk. Her voice shook, but her words held steady. The lawyer adjusted his spectacles. He spoke plain. There was talk of a codicil. Lady Bramley mentioned it, but no draft was filed, no paper signed, nothing binding. Lydia's breath left her chest in a rush. So there is no will in my favor? He nodded. None. Rumor only. Whisper turned to certainty in gossip, but in law, nothing. Lydia closed her eyes. Relief pressed her shoulders down. But it did not free her. The debt remained. The suspicion still clung. She left the office with heavy steps. The villagers watched her pass, eyes sharp, whispers cutting. Companion, codicil, fortune. She hurried on. Her cheeks burned. Her hands clenched tight at her sides. She reached the lane. Her memory dragged her back to dawn, back to that sound. She had risen early, the house silent, her steps soft along the hall. She passed the fuse box, and she saw. Mrs. Brigadier, the housekeeper, stood there, keys in her hand. A strand of wire coiled at her side. She moved with purpose, eyes sharp, hands steady. Lydia froze in the shadow. She dared not speak. She dared not ask. She slipped away, unseen. Now the memory burned. She had held it back. Fear kept her silent. Fear of being accused. shame that she had seen and done nothing. She stopped at the garden wall. Her breath shook. She pressed her palms flat against the stone. Her nails dug deep. She was there. Lydia whispered. I saw her with the keys. The image returned, Mrs. Brigg bending low, her hand twisting at the screws, the wire glinting in the morning light. Lydia shuddered. Why had she stayed silent? Why had she let the inspector circle her instead? Her pride had chained her. Her fear had tied her tongue. She closed her eyes. She still heard the hiss of the urn, the sharp crack when the tap spat, the fall of Lady Bramley's body, and she, Lydia, branded guilty by silence. Her lips trembled. Her words crawled out, soft but true. She had the keys. Moisture carries current. Miss Marple placed her hands on the table edge. Her eyes followed the path. Tap to tray, tray to lace, lace to radiator, a full circuit. She bent closer. The runner was not just damp. It was soaked along a line, deliberate, not careless. She spoke gently. Water made the bridge, a bridge from urn to iron. Slack scowled. You mean it wasn't enough to tamper with the wires? She nodded once. Moisture carried the rest. No slip. No chance. Planned, the constable muttered. Someone spilled. Marple's eyes lifted. No spill. No guest would wet lace this way. The damp was set before. Hours before. She straightened. Her gaze swept the servants, her tone calm but sharp. Who changed linens late? The maids glanced at each other. One stepped forward, hesitant. We never touch the drawing room after noon. Only Mrs. Brigg does. She says no one else lays them neat. Marple nodded slowly. And watering? The plants by the sill. Who handles them? The same maid answered. Mrs. Brigg, ma'am, always. She keeps the key to the cabinet. Marple's eyes rested on the housekeeper. Mrs. Brigg's face stayed still, her chin lifted, her lips pressed thin, Slack barked. You deny it? Mrs. Brigg's voice cut hard. I set the cloth, yes, and I water. But damp lace proves nothing. Anyone might spill. Marple's head tilted. Yet no servant says so. Only you had the touch. She turned back to the table. Her fingers traced the edge of the runner. The pattern darkened where water had settled. The stain ran direct to the radiator's base. Not chance, Marple whispered. Choice. Slack frowned deeper. So you think she meant to guide the current? Marple nodded again. Yes, metal tap, wet lace, radiator frame, a perfect line. Lady Bramley's hands made the final link. The constable scratched his head. That means whoever wet this cloth meant to kill her outright. Marple replied, soft but firm. Indeed. And meant it to look like an accident? Old wiring, faulty urn, easy excuse. She folded her hands together. Her knitting lay untouched in her bag. Her thoughts lay heavy instead. Habits kill. But here another habit betrayed the killer. The habit of control. The linens, the plants, the very order of the room, all in one hand. Slack eyed her sharply. You point too much at one person. Marple met his gaze. I point at the truth. It does not shift. She turned once more to the staff, her tone calm, yet final. Bring me the records, the laundry book, the ledger kept of cloths changed and washed. Her words hung still. The staff froze. Marple asked for the laundry ledger. Numbers betray more than words. Inspector Slack sat at the desk. The ledger lay open. His finger traced the lines. The maid stood waiting. She kept her eyes down. Slack read aloud. Tea day, extra wash, noted. Why? The maid swallowed. Mrs. Brigg ordered it, sir. Said the guests were special. Slack flipped the page. He read the entry again. Unusual marks, different ink. A cloth washed late, not routine. His eyes narrowed. And this, starch, wire wool, polish. All bought this morning. Why? Mrs. Briggs stood near the door, her arms folded. Guests demand shine, she said flatly. Standards must hold. Lady Bramley insisted. Slack grunted. Polish, I understand. Starch, too. But wire wool? For what? Mrs. Briggs' chin lifted. For scouring pots. For keeping taps bright. Slack tapped the page. Strange you needed it. The same morning she died. Her lips pressed. She gave no reply. Slack leaned back. Doubt stirred in him. Evidence piled on Lydia. Yet each scrap pointed also at the housekeeper. He closed the book. He looked at Marple. She sat calm, hands folded. Her eyes told him nothing, yet everything. Slack rose. He crossed to the fuseboard. The panel hung slightly loose. He pried it back with care. He bent closer. The wire gleamed thick, fresh, not dusted, not old, cut with steady hands. He reached for his glass. He pressed it near the edge. The wood held a faint smear, shiny, curved. Slack's breath caught. A mark, not dust, not scratch, the curve of a fingertip. The constable leaned in. Sir. Slack nodded slowly. A print, partial, right here. He straightened, his jaw set firm. His mind turned over every step. Fuse replaced, cloth dampened, urn wired, each part in place. Lydia's debt weighed heavy, yes, but her knots were weak, her hands too clumsy. The ledger said she had no reach. Someone else moved with precision. He looked back at the book. Extra wash, wire wool, strange purchases, excuses given, answers thin. He rubbed his temple. His certainty wavered. He felt the weight of choice. Which way? Did the balance fall? The constable cleared his throat. Shall we bag the board, sir? Slack's voice was low. Yes. Seal it. Guard it. He turned his head slowly. His eyes locked on Mrs. Brigadier. Her face gave nothing, but her hands twitched once, quick, before she stilled them. Slack's own hand clenched. The case shifted under him, the ledger's lines, the board's print, the maid's whisper. Together. They pressed a single name forward. He pointed at the board again. A partial print appeared on the fuseboard frame. No one listens. To the small ones. Nell, the scullery maid, stood near the wall. Her apron twisted in her hands. Her head stayed low. Her voice barely rose. Marple leaned forward kindly. You felt something at servants' tea, child? Nell nodded quick. Her eyes flicked up, then dropped again. Yes, ma'am, I touched the tap. A shock went through me, not hard, just enough to sting. It scared me. Slack stepped closer. Why didn't you tell anyone? Nell's lips pressed, her shoulders curled. They all laugh when I speak. They say I'm silly, so I said nothing. Marple's voice stayed soft. But you remember the time? Yes, ma'am. A little after 3. We'd sat for tea. I filled a cup. That's when it bit me. I pulled back, quick. Marple nodded. Her fingers tapped her notebook. The time matched her own map. Earlier than the ladies' fall, earlier than the guests. Slack crossed his arms. And you saw nothing else? Nell swallowed. Her hands wrung tighter. I did, sir. I saw Mrs. Brigg. The room shifted at the words. Eyes turned sharp. Even Lydia lifted her head fast. Nell's voice thinned to a whisper. She carried something, small, a roll. I thought it was ribbon, but it shone like wire. She tucked it in her apron pocket. Slack's face hardened. You're certain? Nell nodded quick again. Yes, sir. Certain. She went to the fuse box after. I saw her bend. She turned the screws. I thought it was nothing. She always fixes things. But then I felt the shock. Marple's eyes glowed steady. Describe the roll, Nell. Thin, coiled, bright, like thread but harder. She held it tight in her hand. Marple looked at Slack, her voice plain. Fuse wire, the same found in Lydia's drawer, but here, seen in another hand. Slack's jaw clenched. He barked. Why wait until now to speak? Nell trembled. I was afraid. If I said it, she'd turn me out. I have no family, no place to go. Fear kept me quiet. Marple touched her sleeve lightly. Truth spoken late still carries weight. Nell's breath shook. She dared one look toward Mrs. Brigadier. The housekeeper's face stayed stone, but her eyes cut sharp. Nell dropped her gaze again. She went in the morning too, before sun. I fetched water. I saw her. She held the keys. She opened the board. She put the wire there. I remember it now. The room froze. No sound. But Nell's breathing. Slack's eyes narrowed. Morning? You saw her at the board in morning? Nell nodded. Her voice steadied at last. Yes, sir. She put it there. Morning. One witness is mercy. Two is proof. Miss Marple stood by the hearth. Her eyes moved from Nell to the others. Nell's words still hung heavy. But Marple was not done. A knock sounded at the door. A constable entered with a boy. He carried a cap in his hands. His boots scuffed the floor. Slack raised his brow. Who's this? Tim, sir, the constable answered. Delivery boy, from the village. Marple nodded gently. Tim, tell us what you saw. The boy shuffled. His voice cracked. I saw Mrs. Brigg at the ironmonger early that morning, before breakfast. She bought wire, shiny coil, paid cash. He gave her paper to wrap it. Slack's eyes sharpened. You're certain it was her? Tim nodded fast. Certain, sir. She gave me a look, told me to keep quiet, said it was house business. Marple turned to the constable. Fetch the ironmonger. Minutes later, the shopkeeper arrived. His apron still dusted with filings. He bowed stiff. Slack wasted no time. Did you sell wire this morning? The man nodded. Yes, 15 amp, strong stuff, not common here. A woman paid in cash, said it was for mending. She gave no name. Marple stepped forward, her voice calm. And her face? The man looked at Mrs. Brigadier, his eyes fixed. That's her, no mistake. The room stirred, whispers spread. Mrs. Brigg's jaw clenched. Marple held up the wrapping paper Tim carried, string tied neat, left loops, Tate finish. She compared it to pantry bundles. The match was exact. She laid the paper down, her words slow. The knot is hers, the hand is hers, the purchase is hers, the witness is clear. Slack looked back at Lydia, his tone low. Then what of the wire in her drawer? Marple's eyes softened. Planted, to frame her. The drawer left open just enough. The box placed to be found. Too neat, too ready. Lydia's eyes filled. Her voice broke. I said, it was not mine. Slack's jaw tightened. The case tilted before him. The pieces aligned, sharp as glass. Marple closed her notebook, her hands folded steady. One witness may be doubted. Two stand firm. Both point to the same hand. Not Lydia, not chance, but Mrs. Brigg. The housekeeper's face stayed set. But her eyes darted once, quick, then stilled again. Marple's voice cut through the silence. Bring everyone to the drawing room. Let the machine speak. Miss Marple stood by the table. The urn sat silent. The fuseboard lay open. The damp lace runner stretched across the tray. Slack crossed his arms. Show us. Marple nodded. She held up a small coil. Not live, a safe wire. The rest is unchanged. She fixed the coil in place. Her hands moved steady. Set the plug. She poured water. She laid the runner damp again. The constable shifted uneasy. Dangerous, ma'am. Marple shook her head. No current this time, only the path. She pointed to the urn. Here is the start. Tap in the right hand. Her finger moved along the cloth. Water carries it here. She tapped the tray edge. Metal spreads it wide. She touched the radiator. Left hand closes the loop. Her habit completed the circuit. Certain death. Slack muttered. And the fuse? Marple turned to the board. She tapped the thick strand. This should melt at danger. Instead it held. Heavy wire was used. The protection was removed. She looked at the faces around her. Without that, no shock would have killed her. With it, she died at once. Lydia clutched her hands. Tears ran silent down her cheeks. She whispered, "It was never me." Marple's eyes softened, then sharpened again. She held up the plug. Knots tied to hold the wires. Left-handed, not loose, not clumsy, exact. Only one hand in this house ties so. Her gaze settled on Mrs. Brigadier, the housekeeper's hand. Mrs. Briggs' lips pressed hard. Her eyes burned. Her silence spoke more than words. Marple's voice stayed calm. Why? Not greed, not envy, fear. The house stood to close, staff pensioned off, future gone. You could not face it. So, you struck. Slack's jaw tightened. Say it plain. She killed to keep her place. Marple nodded once. Yes. She killed because the end of the house meant the end of her life, as she knew it. To her. That was worse than the gallows. The constable stepped forward. "Shall we take her now, sir?" Slack's hand hovered at his belt. He waited. He watched. Marple laid down the runner. Her words carried weight. Lady Bramley died not by chance, not by failing wires, by a design as neat as these knots. The design of the woman who served her longest. The room fell still. The air pressed tight. No one moved. Mrs. Briggs' face twisted. Her eyes darted. Her breath came short. Her hand clenched by her side. Then she turned fast. Her step struck the floor hard. Her shoulder brushed past the constable. Her eyes fixed on the door. Mrs. Briggs reached the door. "Fast. Some crimes are tidy. This one isn't." Inspector Slack stood firm at the door. His hand gripped the cuffs. Mrs. Briggs froze mid-step. The constable seized her arm. She fought once. Her voice snapped. "I kept this house alive. I kept it standing." Slack's tone cut hard. "You kept it alive by killing the one who owned it." Her eyes flashed. Her jaw set. But her words cracked. "She was sending me away. She would close the house. I gave her 20 years, and she threw me out." Slack leaned close. "You threw her out first, into death." Her shoulders sagged. Her breath broke. Her fight drained. She whispered, "I had no choice." Marple's voice came. Soft, there is always choice. Habit can bind. Fear can drive. But choice remains. Mrs. Briggs said no more. The constable fastened the cuffs. The steel clicked tight. Slack gestured to the door. "Take her." The servants stood still. No cheers, no cries, only silence. Lydia leaned against the wall, her face pale, but dry. Slack turned toward her. "You're cleared. The wire was planted. The codicil was rumor. You bear no guilt." Her eyes closed. Relief washed across her, but her lips trembled. "The debt remains. I'll carry it still, but at least not her death." Slack nodded once. Debt is burden, but not crime. She straightened her back. Her pride steadied her voice. "I'll bear it alone. My name stands now. That matters." Marple watched her quietly. She said nothing. Her needles lay untouched in her lap. Slack moved to Marple's side. "You saw it all when we saw nothing. You stitched the scraps together." Marple's smile was faint. Scraps tell stories. Knots tell tales. Habits speak louder than words. Slack muttered. "A habit killed her." Marple shook her head. "A habit betrayed her, and betrayed the one who set the trap. Lady Bramley's habit made her vulnerable. Mrs. Briggs' habit of control gave her away." She looked at the urn, cold now, silent. Only a faint stain left on the lace. Her voice dropped low. Tea was her comfort, her certainty, and it became her end. Slack exhaled heavy. "Some crimes are clean. This one leaves ashes." Marple's eyes softened. Grief leaves ashes, too, and ashes scatter, but they remind us, habits soothe us, until they betray us. The servants lowered their heads. Even Fanshawe coughed quietly, as if in respect. Lydia stood straighter, pride steadying her like armor. Marple rose. She gathered her knitting. She folded it slow, each stitch neat. Her gaze lingered on the urn. Her words drifted quiet. Another kettle hisses. Another habit waits.